All right, so let's give this one more try. So welcome once again to the online state hiring workshops for today. And so we're going to be doing part 2. My name is Osvaldo Ramirez, and I'm one of the training managers with the Training Administration Unit. And I have with me one of my colleagues, Jonathan, who also is a manager with the Statewide Training Unit. And so for today's webinar, and this is going live, we're going to be having different ways to communicate with you. Pretty much everyone is on mute. And if you have any questions, make sure you go to the Q&A section component at the very bottom of the screen. Also, we have the chat box if you have any comments, but we would like to definitely address all of those questions that you read in the Q&A pod at the bottom, so that way we can answer them towards the very end. So today we're going to have Brandon Littlejohn presenting to us on the state app, the resume and the SOQ process. And so I'll leave it up to him so that he can lead us. And if anything else comes up, Jonathan and myself are here to assist you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Osvaldo. Again, my name is Brandon Littlejohn. I'm the statewide recruiter at CalHR. I'd like to thank the Labor Agency as well as the Employment Development Department for allowing CalHR to come here today and present to you about the state application, resume, statement of qualifications, also known as SOQ, and how to tailor all three documents to make sure you're successful with finding a state job. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint presentation, and this will be provided to you after today's presentation. All right, let's get started. Let's get into the tips and tricks for success. The topics we will cover will be the Form 678 state application. I'll also discuss the application screening process that is done by state hiring managers. The tips for a successful application package. What is the statement of qualifications and how do you develop it? Tailoring your resume. Why it's important to create a CalCareers account, and then we'll have a questions and answer session after today's presentation. Why should you apply for the state of California? Well, we're one of the largest employers in the state with over 150 state departments that it has locations throughout all 50 plus counties in California. We have over 220,000 employees with the state. And for our permanent positions, we offer benefits, retirement, as well as paid days off, such as personnel holidays, and personal development days. We have over 3,500 classifications with the state of California, and that could range from entry-level positions, such as an office assistant, an office technician, where you will need little work experience, to jobs where you will need a substantial amount of work experience, such as a psychiatrist, a software engineer, accounting officers, and more. For this presentation, we're going to definitely discuss the state application, because with the state application, you have to tailor your experience for each vacancy that you apply for. There's not a one-size-fits-all application. That's because we have the merit process with the state of California, meaning that the state can only hire the most qualified persons for the job. And the only way we can determine if you're the most qualified person for the job is if you let us know. And that's through your state application, resume, and statement of qualifications. So that is very important. Always tailor your application to the position that you're applying for. If you're applying for a clerical position, we want to see that you've done clerical experience in the past. If you're applying for a management position with the state, tell us your leadership and management experience. So always relate your experience to the job you're applying for. For all vacancies with the state of California, you have to fill out an STD 678, which is our standard state application. This is the primary document that is used by supervisors and hiring managers to screen applicants for an interview. Therefore, if you only put one sentence down in your previous experience, there will not be much for the hiring manager to go by in order to select you for an interview. Some departments get upwards of 200 to 300 applications for one job vacancy, and we can only interview 5 to 10 people from that 200 to 300 people that apply. So you have to tell us why you're the best candidate for the job. The human resources of each state department is responsible for verifying that you meet the minimum qualifications for a position, and they will utilize your state application to determine if you meet the minimum qualifications. So again, please provide detail in your state application. And you must follow all application instructions, and it has to be filled out completely and accurately. We have over 150 state departments, and the hiring process is decentralized, which means that each state department is responsible for hiring at their particular department. For example, if you apply for the Employment Development Department, EDD, you must follow up with EDD if you have any questions regarding your application status. If you apply for a job at CHP, the California Highway Patrol, you have to follow up with them because they're responsible for hiring for their department. If you apply for a job at CalHR, please contact CalHR because we're responsible for hiring at our particular department. There's always a contact person listed in a vacancy, and I will show you that later on in the presentation. So please keep that in mind. Each state department is responsible for their own hiring. So if you have any questions regarding your application, please contact the department you applied for. But where can you find your state application? www.calcareers.ca.gov is the central website that all 150 state departments post their vacancies and examinations. If you attended last week's presentation, you know that for the state of California's hiring process, you need to take and pass an examination in order to be eligible to be hired for a state position. All of those examinations and vacancies will be posted on calcareers.ca.gov. And you will find your state application in your CalCareer account, which I will show you later on in today's presentation. However, before we go on, let's go into a little bit more detail about the application screening process. Hiring supervisors and managers must use predetermined objective screening criteria to select candidates. And to reiterate my point from earlier on, we have the merit hiring process with the state of California. So we cannot create subjective hiring criteria. The hiring criteria has to be based upon the job duties. You will find the job duties in the job announcement. There are 3 main documents that will explain exactly what you'll be doing for the job. The class specification is always linked to each vacancy, and that will give you a generality of what that classification will do. And again, we have 3,500 classifications. So each one of those classifications has its own class specification that will tell you what in general you'll be doing. But to be more specific, we have the job description for each vacancy, and that will go into more detail about what your day-to-day routine will be. However, the most important document we utilize is the third document, the duty statement. And I'll get more into the duty statement in a couple of slides. But the screening criteria that we utilize is based upon those 3 documents. So it's pretty much an open book test whenever you're developing your application. The information is not hidden of what we're looking for when we screen applicants. It will tell you the essential duties you'll be performing, the desirable qualifications, the functions of the job, the knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies needed to be successful in this particular vacancy. So you want to utilize all that information to craft your application. Always utilize the documents we provide because that is our screening criteria. And again, it's like an open book test. You can use the answers we provide for you, and then you'll be successful. However, if you do not, then you do not know exactly what we will be screening for and what we will need from you. So always read that information and do not send in the same application that you use to apply for 10 different jobs. You always want to customize your application for each job you apply for, because we're going to be looking for different skill sets for each vacancy. Moving on, going into more detail about the duty statements. Duty statements identify the position's routine tasks and percentages. For example, might say 45% of the time you will be doing the following duties. And that's where you want to use that information to customize your state application, resume, and statement of qualifications, also known as SOQ. Most state departments will provide a link to the duty statement on their job vacancy. However, if the department that is hiring does not provide a duty statement, there's always a contact person listed in the vacancy announcement. Please contact that person listed and request for that duty statement. This is standard practice. So do not feel like you're doing anything wrong if you contact the hiring department and ask for a copy of the duty statement. I speak a lot about criteria, tailoring your application, but what does that exactly mean? Well, when you're reading that class specification, that job description, and that duty statement, you need to let us know what type of experience that you have that is relevant. For instance, if you're applying for a training officer position with the state of California, you need to list out what previous presentation and training experience you have. Also, a common duty that you'll have to have is provide written documents to the public or to your customers. What written communication experience do you have? Whether that's through correspondence, emails, did you have to develop reports? And sometimes people do not have that experience in a work setting. So you may have to include your written experience in a resume, especially if you're using college experience to qualify. Because on the state application, you can only list the duties you performed under work experience. You can list the colleges you attended and the degree that you obtained, but you're unable on our state application to put the classes that you took that were relevant to the position that you're applying for. And that's where you will use your resume to describe your educational experience that qualifies you for the position. So don't think just because you don't have this experience in a formal work setting that your experience doesn't count. You want to utilize all experience when developing your state application, resume, and statement of qualifications. Next, any computer or technical skills that is listed on the job announcement / bulletin and the duty statement. A common computer technology that is going to require you to use is Microsoft Suite. Microsoft Suite is Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Microsoft Outlook. If you use or have used any of these software applications in the past, this is where you will tell us your experience. State hiring managers cannot assume your work experience. So if you don't tell us, you do not get credit. Every day you might use Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Excel for spreadsheets. But again, if you do not put this work experience down, we cannot give you credit for it. So always think about these things when developing your application. If it's written on the duty statement and in the job announcement, it should be somewhere in your application, resume, or statement of qualifications that you have done that type of work. If you haven't utilized any of those computer softwares, that is okay as well. But we want to know your relevant experience. Never put that I don't have the experience you're looking for, but I'm a quick learner. Unfortunately, the state of California has to hire the most qualified person for the job. So on your application, statement of qualifications, and resume, we don't want to hear about the experience you don't have. We want to hear about the relevant experience you do have. So always keep that in mind. Next, additional criteria that the state of California is looking for is customer service experience. A lot of times people assume that we're looking for customer service experience in a professional office setting, but you can get customer service experience from working in a retail job, working in the fast food industry, working in the restaurant industry. It's all about how you write your application. For instance, if you worked for a fast food chain, you do not want to include that you flipped the burgers or you made the fries, unless you're applying for a cook supervisor position with the state of California. And again, the state has over 3,500 classifications, so we do have cooks with the state. You want to put the relevant experience from your fast food job, such as I dealt with over 100 customers a day. I had to multitask. Information like that. You had to resolve customers' inquiries and or complaints. Let us know that experience, not experience that is not relevant to the job. Next, if you have any research or analysis experience, let us know. For the staff services analyst position with the state of California, the minimum requirements is that you have to have a bachelor's degree. Work experience is not required. So a lot of times people will apply for staff services analyst positions with the state of California, but do not have previous work experience. So there's not much they can put on their state application. And again, that's where you want to use your resume and be creative and talk about the relevant work that you did while in college, such as reports. If you got your degree, you definitely did reports that took some type of research or analysis. Let us know in your resume what experience you do have. If you do have research and analysis experience in a work setting, let us know as well. Do not assume that we don't need the information, because with our screening criteria, we have to select the persons who has the most relatable skill sets, and they have to let us know on paper and in the interview. And we'll talk about the interview process in workshop 3, which is next Monday. Next, if you have any project management experience, please let us know and detail that, or administrative experience. So employment history general tips. You want to list the months, dates, and years for the positions you held, not just years. The human resources of each department has to calculate to see if you meet the minimum qualifications. For example, the office technician, which is a very popular classification with the state, says that you need 2 years of clerical experience. There is other criteria that allows you to get and meet the minimum qualifications for an office technician. However, for this particular example, we'll just focus on the 2 years of clerical experience. If you put on your application that you worked from January 2018 to January of 2020, we can assume that you have 2 years of experience. However, if you do not indicate what the actual start date and the end date was, we can't assume that you have 2 years of experience. An example, if you started on January 31st of 2018 and you finished the job on January 1st of 2020, that's 1 year, 11 months of experience. That's not 2 years of experience. So even though it's close, you will not be admitted to apply for that particular vacancy because you do not meet the minimum qualifications. So that's why it's very important to list exactly the month and the day and year that you started. Also, hours per week. We consider at the state of California 40 hours per week as full-time employment. If you work 20 hours per week for 2 years, to the state of California, when we're screening your application, you do not have 2 years of work experience. You have half of that because you didn't work full-time, which is 40 hours. If you work 20 hours, you have 1 year of experience, even though the time range is a 2-year time period, but you only worked an average of 20 hours per week. So you got half that. And our human resources office will calculate that experience. So make sure you indicate that. And do not put an average of hours down because we're going to take the lowest number. So if you said you worked from 20 to 30 hours per week, we're going to say that you worked 20 hours per week because we don't want to give you more credit than you actually worked. So you have to average that time out for us. So if it's you work between 20 and 30 hours a week, please put 25 hours because that's the average of 20 to 30. Also, on your state application, be sure to list your supervisor and a working phone number. We understand that with a lot of private industry employers, they do not want you to put your supervisor's number down or your supervisor's name. A lot of times they want you to put the general 1-800 number or the human resources office number. So put that if your employer does not allow you to contact a supervisor directly for a reference check, or if we need to check that you actually worked for that particular employer. A common question I receive all the time is if a business is no longer around, what should you do? In that case, for business address, you put no longer in business. So then for the supervisor's phone number, again, no longer in business because you cannot put information down that's not available. So where to look on a job posting? Focus
Hey,
on.
Brandon?
Yes.
Sorry, this is Jonathan. Before you move on to the next topic, are you able to answer 2 questions for me that we received in the questions pod about experience?
Absolutely.
An anonymous attendee did ask, can you list internships in your experience section on the application or just work experience?
That's a great point, whoever asked that question. I'm going to get into that in a couple of slides, but yes, put down all relevant experience, whether it was internship or volunteer experience. Sometimes people volunteer at their local community center for their fraternity or sorority, for social clubs, the PTA at your local school. Whatever that relevant experience is, please list that, paid and non-paid experience.
Awesome, thank you. And we had another question. When filling out the experience section, should they not use bullet points and just sentences?
Yes. In my opinion, bullet points will take up too much space. And if you're really tailoring your application to the position, your hardest issue will be minimizing your relevant experience and getting rid of so much stuff. If you have a lot of room left to add bullet points, then you may want to relook at that class specification, duty statement, as well as the job description to see what other elements you can add. But typically, most great applications, you're gonna be filling all that information out to the maximum, and you won't even have enough character spaces to add bullet points.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Absolutely, and that brings me to another point. If you do not have enough room to enter in relevant experience on your state application, that's where you put that additional relevant experience in your resume, in your cover letter, or your statement of qualifications. Now, a cover letter is not always asked for. Most of the time, for our vacancies, we will not request a cover letter. It's optional. However, if it's required, you have to include that, and it will have instructions on what you should include. But again, if you do not have enough space on your state application to indicate all your relevant experience, that's where you really want to utilize the resume and statement of qualifications, because you do not want to just regurgitate the same information that you put on your state application in your resume or statement of qualifications, because again, we want to see a breadth of experience and education that makes you the most qualified person. So on your job posting, what you should focus on are the following phrases: the desirable skills and qualifications, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the essential functions of the job, and the specific duties that are listed. And that's what you want to tailor your experience and education to. Bottom line, to be competitive, it is critical that you tailor your application to the position and avoid generic submissions. Again, hiring managers get upwards of 300 applications just for one job vacancy. And they can tell when somebody took the time to customize the application for the position. And we know when a person is just applying for multiple positions with the same application, because it looks like that. The duties you performed are generic. It doesn't have specific information talking about the position you're applying for. So when tackling the statement of qualifications, please do not repeat or reference to the 678 state application. Do not say, as stated in my state application. No, this is a separate document. Utilize it. Also, you want it in narrative format. You do not want it to look like your resume, which is a common mistake that people make. You want it to read as an essay that you would do in school. We want to see if you can form sentences, if you can use complete thoughts to express yourself. So always have it in a narrative format. There's going to be specific instructions and specific questions that are asked of you. I recommend to number the questions that you're answering. For instance, at the top of the page, question 1 may be, please tell us your experience, education, and training that has prepared you for this position of accounting officer. That will be question 1. You respond to that question, and then question 2 is right after that. You want to let us know what question you're responding to. So you do not want the hiring manager guessing what you're responding to. You want to make sure it's as clear as possible for them. Also, refer to specific roles or projects that you do. that you've done, that you've accomplished. You do not want to give generic responses such as project management. What does that mean to us? I worked on numerous reports. How many are numerous? 2 could be numerous. 100 is more than 2, but if you don't know, or if you don't let us know, we don't know. Always use relevant examples from professional, educational, and/or volunteer and internship experience. So back to the question that was asked a few minutes ago, absolutely include volunteer experience, internship experience, student assistant experience. It's all relevant. Another question that is always asked is, how far do I go back on my statement of qualifications, state application, and resume? Use all relevant experience with the state. We do not discriminate based upon age. So that's a common question that is asked, that, hey, I did this job 20, 30 years ago, and so that kind of will let people know my age. Should I not include this? We cannot discriminate based upon any protected class. And those are age is a protected class under EEO, which is Equal Employment Opportunity Act. So include all relevant experience. If it was 40 years ago, include it, but always tailor it to the job announcement, duty statement, and class specification. So that's the statement of qualification. Next is your resume. My recommendation is to highlight specific information on the duty statement, class specification, and the job announcement that you did not mention in your other documents, such as statement of qualifications in your application. The resume is supposed to complement those other 2 documents, the statement of qualifications and state application. It's not supposed to be the exact same duties and skill sets that you said you had on those previous 2 documents I mentioned. It has to stand alone. If you're thinking, well, what can I put on there? If you have college experience that you could not put in the state application, that's a great area to put coursework that you completed, your dissertation that you had to do in college, etc. So you want to use relevant information that you didn't say previously. Now, sometimes you might have to use some of the same information from what was listed in your state application. However, use different examples of projects that you worked on. Use different examples of customer service experience that you have. Let us know what knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies that you have. For your resume, you can use bullet points, but for your state application and your statement of qualifications, avoid using bullet points. And again, as reiterated through today's presentation, always discuss relevant skill sets that is not included. Always tailor your application, statement of qualifications, and resume to the position you're applying for. A big thing also is quantifying your experience. Quantifying your experience will help the hiring manager and supervisor clearly see that you meet their screening criteria. If you tell me that you have computer experience, what does that mean to me? If you tell me that you've done training before, you facilitated training, what does that mean to me? What trainings have you developed and facilitated? Did you use the ADDIE model to develop your trainings? Also, what projects did you work on? When did it finish? How much did it cost? You have to let us know all of this information because, again, we cannot assume. And as stated earlier, by quantifying your experience, it helps the human resources offices at the different departments determine if you meet the minimum qualifications to apply for that particular position. How do you quantify? Think time, money, and amounts. For example, the dollar amounts of projects of which you were involved. How many calls, how many inquiries, how many emails did you receive on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis? Length of time it took you to develop a procedure, a manual, or a process. Always quantify your experience. For example, I have customer service experience because I answer one call a year. However, my competition that's applying for that job didn't say they had customer service experience. They say, I answer over 100 calls daily. The hiring manager is going to go with the person that quantified their experience over the person that gave us generic experience, because we know that a person can handle a large volume of calls. Customer service experience does not tell us anything. So always keep this in mind when developing the 3 documents we're discussing today. What is the number of different projects or presentations you developed or delivered? The number of customers you served. When talking about your lead person experience, what is the number of team members that you were the lead of, or you managed, or you supervised? We need this information. It's important to us. Now, we're going to go to the CalCareers website to look exactly where the state application is, what the duty statement will look like, and more. But before I go to the live website, are there any additional questions, Jonathan or Osvaldo?
Yes, we have a few questions, actually. I was in the process of answering some of them, but the one question that we keep receiving in the question and answers box is about the resume. And should we limit the resumes to 1 page?
There's no maximum or minimum amount that you can send in a resume. We just want to make sure that it's relevant experience. And if it's the same information that you're going to be providing on the statement of qualifications and state application, I would say limit it to 1 page. But if it is different information that's relevant and it takes 2 to 3 pages, that works for us as well.
Awesome, thank you. And we have another question from Nicole Clark. She asked, what if the experience you post is from a business you previously owned, like a sole proprietorship?
That works as well. There are plenty of business owners that work for the state, or former business owners that work for the state. That's actually a great thing that you own the business, because you can put a lot of relevant experience for most of our jobs, whether it's clerical work, management, timekeeping, contracts, supply coordination, etc. So you can utilize a lot of relevant experience for being a business owner. And typically for supervisor, you would say self.
Thank you. And we had a question from Ignacio. I thought you did not have to submit a resume on state applications.
You want to follow all application instructions, and I will go through an example in the next few minutes. Some vacancies will request that you have to send in a resume. Some will say send in a resume and a statement of qualifications. Some will say send in a resume, statement of qualifications, and a cover letter and your transcripts. So each job description is going to be different. So you always have to read the job descriptions. You may have viewed a job description that didn't require a resume, but most of our positions will ask for a resume and or statement of qualifications.
Thank you. And we have a question on the SOQ. Do you recommend, and I always recommend this, but do you recommend to type out the question of the SOQ in your document prior to answering the question?
Absolutely. And again, you want to type out the question because it will help the hiring manager screener to know what question you're responding to, and it makes your thoughts seem more clearer.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I recommend that as well. Just to differentiate between the answers, and it's easier for the hiring manager to kind of have a grasp of how you're answering the question.
Absolutely.
There's a few more. Let me double check. Answer that. And we have a question from Carrie about tailoring each job application resume. Do you recommend to tailor every single application and resume?
Absolutely. And that's how you get a state job, is to tailor every application and resume to the position. And again, all of the information will be posted online, so you do not have to search, hey, what is the hiring manager looking for in their top candidate? All that information is provided for you in the vacancy. You just have to take the time and answer pretty much what it's saying. For instance, if it said some of the essential duties will be researching laws, rules, and regulations relevant to the position you're applying for. Tell us your experience researching laws, rules, and regulations for that particular vacancy. You want to go through and make sure you're answering and responding to all those duties listed and those knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies needed. And that's how you're going to get a state job, is customizing every application to the vacancy you apply for. Because you can open up 3 different vacancies right now, and each one will differentiate in some form or fashion, even if it's the same classification.
I strongly agree with that as well. I also want to share that you want to read the SOQs and not submit resumes in lieu of the SOQs for every single job that you're applying for. Every SOQ most likely will be different from each other.
Absolutely.
And we have a question about education. If they receive their education or diploma from a different country, can they list equivalent to bachelor?
Absolutely. And after today's presentation, we will provide you with information such as frequently asked questions section. And in that frequently asked questions section, which is in the help and tutorial section on CalCareers, right above the arrow that you're seeing on your screen, there's a section that says help and tutorials. In the frequently asked questions area, we have over 100 questions that we have answered. And that is one of the most popular questions that is asked. Does the state of California accept degrees from a foreign country? And yes, we do. It just has to be an accredited university. And we have a listing of those accredited universities in that frequently asked questions section. So you can see if your degree or your university is accredited if you go to the frequently asked questions section.
Awesome. And we have one more question before if you can move on after this. It's
Perfect.
Again about education. If we submit transcripts, are we likely to be interviewed because we have a lower GPA according to the merit system?
No, unless the job description says that you have to have straight A's or a 3.0 grade point average, then we cannot mark you down for that. We can only screen you based upon the criteria that is listed in the job description. So usually we're looking for coursework. So have you completed, for accounting technician, they're going to ask you if you submitted or if you completed a certain amount of hours to qualify. Well, you have to show us your transcripts that lets us know that you completed this particular coursework. So we're just looking for completion of that coursework, not the grades.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so what you're seeing on your screen right now is a screenshot of the CalCareers website. And our recommendation is to create an account before you do anything on this website. And let me go to our website to show you why it's important to create your account first. So I'm going to go to create account login, and I'm going to log into my account. So in your CalCareer account, you can update your contact information. This is very important because you always want to have relevant contact information. So if a hiring department contacts you and says, we want to interview you, we can reach out to you. The additional records tab, this is where you will see if you have veteran status or if you're qualified for LEAP and you have your LEAP certified. And LEAP is Limited Examination and Appointment Program for persons with disabilities. I won't go into these two topics because we went into that last week, and a recording will be provided for you at a later date for that particular presentation. Now, the most important aspect is the application templates. This is what we were discussing throughout today's presentation, is tailoring your application. So you click on application templates. As you see, John Doe has at least 10 applications that they developed. One for accounting technician, one for an analyst, one for a position at Caltrans. The reason being that there's 10 applications in John Doe's account because you want to customize your application for each vacancy you apply for. Now, that doesn't mean create a whole new application each time. You don't necessarily have to. You might have to add additional duties that are relevant to the position you're applying for. Sometimes you will take away information that is not relevant, but you always want to customize it in some form or fashion. So what I'm going to do for this example is go to View Edit for Accounting Technician. You want to name your application. And one thing also that always people will ask is, can hiring managers go into your CalCareer account and see what jobs you previously applied for? No, we only have access to the job you applied for with us. So if you applied for, if I had a vacancy at CalHR and you apply for my vacancy, I can only see that vacancy. If Jonathan has a vacancy at EDD and you apply for that particular vacancy, even though Osvaldo works for EDD, he cannot see Jonathan's application. CalHR cannot see the application that you applied for with Jonathan as well. So that's always a common question. Can we just go into your account and see your applications? No, you have to apply for our position for us to see that particular application. Eligibility, another common question. If you took and passed an examination, you will have list eligibility because you will go on an eligibility list. So you always will click on list eligibility if you took and passed an examination. This is general questions. You do not have to answer the questions. Do you meet the minimum and or maximum age requirements? Do you possess a valid California driver's license? Or how many words per minute can you type? If the job description does not require it. There are some jobs that do require you to indicate this information. For instance, to be a highway patrol officer, you cannot be over the age of 35. You also have to be a minimum of 18. So that's where it's important that you enter in if you meet the minimum and or maximum age requirements. Do you possess a valid California driver's license? This is only important if your job requires you to drive. For instance, a highway maintenance worker with Caltrans, you will be driving a Caltrans issued truck. You have to have a valid driver's license. If you're applying for an accountant technician position at EDD, you don't necessarily have to have your driver's license unless it's indicated in the job announcement. So always read the job announcement. That's going to tell you everything you need to know. So on and so forth. So I hit save and continue. They'll ask you, did you graduate from high school? Also, if you attended a university or college, I'm going to go to add education record. You will tell us what university you attended, the location, your course of study, the units completed, and if they were semester or quarter units. If you're still attending college, the diploma or degree you will obtain or have obtained, and the date that you've graduated. If you are a senior or a junior in college and you anticipate that you're going to graduate fall of 2020, December of 2020, indicate your estimated date that you'll graduate. So that's always like a question I receive as well. If you have any licenses or certificates, for instance, if you're a certified forklift driver, if you have a license to practice law in California, those are the type of licenses you will enter in. You do not enter in your driver's license in this. Or if you completed, you got a certificate for completing a Microsoft Word training class. This is going to be a license or a certificate for vocational competence, membership in a professional association like the Bar Association, etc. Those type of licenses. Because I've seen some pretty creative licenses and certificates in this section. Next, I'll click save. Well, actually, after I get out of this education aspect, so save and continue. Are you now employed by the state of California? No. I really am, but for this example, I'll just say no. Have I ever been fired, dismissed, terminated, or had an employment contract terminated from any position for performance or disciplinary reasons? I'll say yes. Explanation, personal. Career growth is another example. However, I have seen very creative language in the termination history section. You want to put your best foot forward to the hiring manager. You do not want to talk about all the problems that you had with your previous employer. Now, in the hiring interview, if they ask you to elaborate on this, you can elaborate. But again, you want to put your best foot forward. You do not want to seem like you will be a problem if you're going to get hired. If every job you were fired from and you have an explanation that it's all these people's fault and that they were terrible employers, because I see that a lot under termination history, that's not appeasing to the hiring manager. You can put personal, you can put career growth, etc. And Jonathan or Osvaldo, do you have anything you want to add for termination history? Because I'm sure you see a lot of creative information in that particular section.
Yes, Brandon. Yes, so sometimes depending on as you're moving on, with your careers, you might switch, or there might be, a lot of change in management, perhaps. And so one of the other common things that I've seen that I know I have used myself is that there was no upward mobility, right? Or also the fact that maybe there was just a lot of change in management. So, there was no other options or no, like you said, no career growth. And also just probably as another one in general, you were trying to seek opportunities, exploring in another industry.
Oh, I like that. Yeah,
All options.
absolutely. That's a great point. Perfect. So now I'm going to go into the employment history. This is what I was discussing most of today's presentation. So go to add employment record. If it's your current employer, say yes. So I started this job on July 1st, 2020. And again, it has the month, the day, and the year, so we can calculate your experience. So if today's date is 7/27 and I started this job on July 1st, 27 minus 1, I have 26 days of experience in this particular job. However, if I go down to hours per work and I work 20 hours per week, instead of having 26 days of experience, I have half of that. I only have 13 days of experience because we consider 40 hours per week full-time work with the state of California. So make sure you indicate the hours per week so the human resources of the particular department can calculate that information. You want to put your job title. I'll put analyst for this example. Company, I'll put insurance. Now you want to let them know, the hiring manager know what insurance company you work for, but for this particular example, I'm just going to put in insurance. Address, well, they went out of business. So I put out of business. Out of business for a supervisor's name as well, unless you have the contact information for your supervisor and you want to use them as a reference, you can put that information there along with the contact number. We already indicated hours per week. And we worked 0 years in this position 1 month because it's about 1 month. Duties performed. This is where you will look at that class specification, that job description, and duty statement, and you want to put the most relevant experience down. So if I put that as in analyst for my insurance company, comma, I completed, or my day-to-day duties include now, as you see, I started off with 1,500 characters. Now I only have 1,432 characters left, and I barely even wrote anything down. So that's why I say if you have a lot of space left, you might want to look at that job description, duty statement, and class spec and see if you can put any other relevant information down. For instance, included utilizing Microsoft Excel daily to complete spreadsheets. Only have 1,372 characters left with that small sentence. But if I start adding bullet points, I'm going to have even less characters, as you see. So you want to utilize those documents to create this particular section. And those documents, again, duty statement, class specification, and the job announcement. Reason for leaving, we've already discussed that in the above section. You want to not put all of your personal information out there, especially if it doesn't sound positive. Again, Osvaldo gave you examples of what to put in this particular area. No upward mobility opportunities, etc. I said career growth. You want to put a positive spin on the reasons for leaving. That's not lying. Maybe you did want to promote. That's career growth or upward mobility opportunities. Osvaldo also talked about change in management. That could be a reason for leaving. But do not go into complete details that are very negative. That's not going to look good to the hiring manager. The hiring manager is not going to say, "Ooh, I need this person right now to start because I know how they can deal with conflict well."
Also, Brandon, if I may add, there's all of the components where you might be laid off. For instance, right now due to COVID, or laid off because business is closing. So just making sure that whatever information you're going to list, it truly reflects, a component of it. But yeah, we don't need to know all the details, obviously, or what happened or who made the decisions and all of that. So business closed due to COVID, or due to slowing down, or there was a change in the ownership of the business.
Yep.
Yep.
Change in ownership. That's a good one. So yes, you put that down under, and actually I put it in the wrong section. You would put it in reason for leaving. All right, perfect. So let me go back to my account and show you a few more things. For your resume and statement of qualifications, you will put this information in your uploaded documents. You can put add a document and select one. What type of document is it? Is it diploma or degree, personal document, references, resume, your transcript? What is this document? Other for statement of qualifications? That's where you would upload those type of documents. That's a common question. EEO information, if you could please fill that information out because it helps recruiters like myself know that we're doing diverse outreach. But this information will not be used as a pro or a negative for you because we have the merit system. So we can only hire you based upon the qualifications that are listed. So hiring managers do not see your EEO information. Recruiters like myself and the HR offices see this information to determine if we're doing diverse outreach. In the job applications, this is where you will see any applications for jobs that you've previously applied for. So these are some example jobs that I've applied for. The status is not submitted. That's because I didn't submit any of these applications. If the status was in progress, that means the hiring department is currently reviewing your application. If your status is submitted, that means the department has received your application. However, they have not gone through the applications at that time. Save jobs. So the save job, this position is for accounting technician. Perfect. Let me click on this accounting technician position. And I clicked on the JC number and it took me to the accounting technician vacancy that the Employment Development Department, EDD, currently has available. It tells you that there's an urgent need. Hires will be made on a flow basis beginning immediately. It gives you a brief job description and duties. But again, the most important document you're going to utilize is this duty statement. And it says you will find additional information about the job in the duty statement. So you will open it up. It tells you all kind of information about this position, where you'll work, the division. And it gives you general idea of the duties you'll be performing. For instance, the incumbent makes routine monetary eligibility determinations and adjustments as they relate to the various claims processing and benefit payment control workload processes, and utilizes a variety of databases, analyze information obtained from a variety of federal, state, and departmental sources, etc. Now, you might not have all of that experience, but what relevant experience do you have? Have you utilized a variety of databases? What are the names of the databases? So you would say on your application, as an analyst, I utilize various databases such as blank, blank, and blank. You have to let us know. It also says analyzes information obtained from a variety of federal, state, and departmental sources. What are those? Do you have to go to leginfo.ca.gov? That's a legislative website. Do you have to use the labor market index? Let us know that. What other federal websites do you have to utilize on a daily basis? Do you utilize CalCareers in your day-to-day job? Let us know. That's a state database. So that's an example of how you would tailor your application. You would go through each sentence and tell us how you have relevant experience to that particular task. Now, going down in the duty statement, this is one of the most important areas as well, the percentage of time that you'll be conducting certain tasks. For instance, it says 40%, 35%, and 15%. As you can assume, 40% is going to be the majority of the time you'll be completing these tasks. So the 40% holds more weight than the 5% area that says perform other duties as assigned. So you want to focus on the higher percentages. An example, analyze and review wage information for routine case assignments for accuracy and completeness, identify irregular wage items, and process required wage adjustments, etc. Let's say you don't have that particular experience, but what documents or what information have you analyzed and reviewed for completeness or identified irregularities in those documents? That could be any documents. You just have to let us know. If you've done the task before, that's relevant. It doesn't have to match exactly. Let us know how your experience is relevant to the position. So that's the key of detailing your application to the duty statement. As you see, there's a lot of information available for you. So if you only have one sentence on your application under duties performed, you more than likely did not utilize the information that's available to you. Let me exit out of the duty statement. I talked a lot about the job description, which is listed here, and it was listed in the duty statement. But one document we didn't look at is the class specification, which is also linked into the vacancy announcement. So under the minimum requirements section, it says you will find the minimum requirements in the class specification. So I'm going to click on this hyperlink for accounting technician. And in the accounting technician, it gives us a definition of typical tasks you will be performing, the distinguishing characteristics. For instance, it says such duties as the preparation of purchase requisitions, the keeping of property inventory records, and the making of arithmetical computations and tabulations are considered of a clerical nature, and such duties alone, etc. You go down, it gives you typical tasks, maintains bookkeeping and accounting control records, makes journal entries, posts to general ledger and subsidiary ledgers. It has a lot of information for you, the knowledge and abilities as well. So there's a lot of information that could be relevant to you that you can put on your state application, resume, and statement of qualifications. Going back to the job announcement, if you scroll down, it has information about the department, EDD. And again, we have over 150 departments. So before you apply for a vacancy for one of the departments, do some research about what the department does on a day-to-day basis. Most people, I'm assuming, know what the Department of Motor Vehicle does, because we have interactions with DMV. A lot of people understand what does EDD do because they may have interactions with EDD. But there's some departments that you may not know of, like Department of Industrial Relations. Do some research about it. Also, the Department of Fair Employment Housing, what exactly do they do? Do research. And we'll have a link for that department right here, because their website is going to be different. We have special requirements, application instructions, how to apply, and there's multiple ways that you can apply. I recommend creating a CalCareer account and applying online because it's free to apply. If you print out your application, you're going to have to pay for the money for your toner of ink. You have to pay for your paper, and you might have to pay for posting. And with what I understand, that the mail might be prolonged as far as when it's being sent out right now due to COVID-19, you can submit your application immediately online and the hiring manager will receive it. But if you use the general mail where you have to use postage, it may take a little while and you might not submit your application before the final filing date. So keep that in mind. We also have an address for dropping off your application. And for this particular vacancy, it says the required application package documents. All you need is your state application and your degree and/or school transcripts. The next question, do I have to submit my resume if it's not asking for a resume? That's up to you. If you will not be dinged if you do not submit your resume because the department didn't ask for it. So for this one, state applications and your degree and/or school transcripts. Desirable qualifications. This is another area you want to utilize to tailor your application, statement of qualifications, and resume. Contact information. Please do not contact CalHR for this particular vacancy. We do not hire for EDD. EDD has their own hiring managers. So you would contact, for this particular example, Sheila Bradley or Sky Staton. If you cannot get a hold of them, we have the EEO officer's contact information as well. So we have 3 contact persons listed if you have any questions regarding this particular vacancy. We have a location of the position section, additional application instructions, and it tells you everything that you need to do when submitting your application. So always read this information. Now I'm going to look up another vacancy. In the previous workshop, I showed you how to search for vacancies, so I won't go step by step how to search for it. You can view the video that will be submitted at a later date. So I'm going to just go to Get a State Job. And I want to do an advanced job search. And for the classification, I want to type in Staff Services Manager, because I want to show you the difference. So I'm going to click on the Staff Services Manager 3 vacancy and click Search Jobs. In the previous example, we were looking at the accounting technician. Let me look. Here goes a position for the Department of Healthcare Services. The location is Sacramento because we hire in all counties, so always pay attention to that. Now, the classification that you took the exam for was a Staff Services Manager 3. But the working title is an Assistant Branch Chief. The working title will help you identify more what your day-to-day duties will be. And it's more descriptive of what your role will be at the department. The Staff Services Manager 3 is a generic title. It doesn't let you know what you'll be doing. But as an Assistant Branch Chief, you kind of have a better idea of the day-to-day tasks you'll be performing. So I'm going to click on View Job Posting. And the main reason I came here was to show you the difference, how every job is going to be different. For this required application package document, it says turn in your state application for STD Form 678 and a statement of qualifications. It says the statement of qualifications should be no more than 2 pages in length, 1.5 space, 1 inch left and right margins, and a font size comparable to Arial 12 point. A resume is optional and does not take the place of a statement of qualifications. Applications received without a statement of qualifications will not be considered. You scroll down. The hiring unit contact, as you see, it's an employee of Department of Healthcare Services. It's not CalHR. It's not EDD. So always contact the hiring unit person listed. And then if you cannot get a hold of that person, you can get a hold of the EEO officer. So let me scroll up a little bit more. For the statement of qualifications, it says use no more than 2 pages in length. If you go to 3 pages in length, you did not follow instructions. If you did not use 1 inch left and right margins, you did not follow instructions. It tells you the FAB performs audits of Medi-Cal cost reports that determine reimbursement for a multitude of Medi-Cal programs. Please describe your experience working on these programs. That will be the question that you're answering. In my opinion, put question number 1 at the top of the page and put that entire 2 sentences. That FAB performs audits of Medi-Cal costs, etc. Please describe your experience working on these programs. Answer that particular question. Each question is going to be different. If you go through the CalCareers website and start applying for different vacancies. And there's no minimum or maximum amount of vacancies you can apply for with the state of California. That's a common question as well. So that's how you tailor your application, resume, and statement of qualifications in order to get hired with the state of California. The last section I want to show you is the help and tutorials area, which I referenced earlier. A question was asked, does a degree from a foreign country, does it count with the state of California? Well, if you look at the frequently asked questions section, we have answered that. Some of the questions we also answered: how can I find out about working for the state in a specific job? Do I have to be a US citizen to work for the state? Do I have to be able to speak English to work for the state? Can I use a college degree from a foreign country? And it has all the listings of accredited senior colleges and universities. Internationally, throughout the United States, throughout California. Again, you can look in this particular section to see if your university is accredited. How do I know that will be on the test? How do I find out what exams I have taken? What health, medical, vision? There's a lot of different questions that we answered in this section, as you see. And typically, most of the questions that my office receives, as well as EDD's office, has already been answered in this frequently asked questions section. So please view that area. Going back to the help and tutorials section, we have video tutorials available for you that will help you get started, and it will talk about the state hiring process, how to electronically apply for state jobs, finding LEAP exams for persons with disabilities, how to upload documents to your account, how to update your EEO information, checking your veteran status, which we discussed, and a lot more. Going back to the help and tutorials section, if you need to contact us for a particular question regarding the CalCareers website or the overall state hiring process, please reach out to CalHR at the 866 number or at our email. EDD will also provide in the next few minutes their contact information, as well as their contact information for their America's Job Centers. Last but not least is the glossary section. Click on this, and these are terms that are commonly used throughout the state of California. We have our own language sometimes with the state of California, and we're getting better with speaking plain English and looking at our website and breaking down the information so it's not such state speak. However, until we revamp all of our websites, if there's a term that you may not understand, if you go to the glossary of state terms, you can view what we're exactly talking about. Accreditation, if your application status is active, that's another question that is always asked. What are additional records, administration method, and adverse action? A glossary of terms A through Z. So if you look at these three sections in the help and tutorials area, you should be fine. Or you can always reach out to CalCareers. If you just want to view what the state application looks like without having to go to your account, you can go to the bottom there, and this is what your application will look like once it's printed out. Because the other view we were looking at was the view from your application template, but this is what the hiring managers is going to see. That space right here for duties performed. If you only have one sentence, we can determine that you're the most qualified person for the job. And do not say "see resume." That's a common mistake that people make. We didn't ask for you to put "see resume" under the state application. We say fill out your application completely and thoroughly. So if you only put C resume, that lets us know that you didn't take the time to fill out your application. So we will review applicants who did take the time to customize their application for the position of interest. Next, are there any questions? And
Yes,
then
we do have a couple questions. Or Jonathan, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can start. We do have an education question from a foreign country. I know this a couple of times, but what happens if the university did not use units and also was closed down about 28 years ago and it does not show on the drop-down menu?
that probably means that your school is not accredited. So you would have to utilize a service that will evaluate your transcripts and let us know what the relevant coursework is. Yeah, so you would have to hire somebody or a personal service, and there's plenty of different service providers that will evaluate your transcripts and tell you what relevant coursework and what it's equivalent to in the States.
Thank you. And we have another question. When listing references for a job application, whether we are listing professional or academic references, should the people we list only be people who are higher ups in supervisory positions, or can we list people who are our fellow academic partners or colleagues?
Typically, you want to put the lead person or a supervisor there for you. You could use one reference that would be a peer, but you do not want to utilize all peers. You want to have some type of person that was in a lead role or a supervisory role that can speak to how you can take directions, etc. What do you think about that, Jonathan and Osvaldo?
I recommend doing a mixture of both in a sense, not necessarily always your partners and colleagues, but you can include that, but you also want to include your higher ups in your supervisory positions like managers and so on. So I could share how you work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to have a balance and also making sure that whomever you're listing, right, is someone that knows that you have applied. I think sometimes happens that you assume that maybe that colleague, can be listed as a reference or that manager, but also you want to make sure that you let them know because sometimes we'll make those phone calls and then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that, so-and-so had applied for a position. So making sure that communication happens.
Perfect.
All right, so let's move on forward with another question. So we have a couple more. It states, let's see, if you already work for the state and put a request in for a hardship transfer, can you only transfer to the same classification, or could it be different classification with the same MQs? For instance, EPR to SSA, but they have the same MQs.
It all depends on the transfer calculator on our website. If you go to calcareers.ca.gov, we have a listing of a transfer calculator, which says that if you make about between 10% minus $1, you can transfer into the particular classification as long as you meet the minimum qualifications. So we have that transfer calculator on calcareers.ca.gov if you go to the state employee section. But again, you have to meet the minimum qualifications listed and put in your salary into the transfer calculator.
All right. So let's move on to another question. So let's see. This is on the open questions. We have about 15 of them. I am near a military base and spouses are always looking for great jobs. Can they apply for a job even though the announcement requires a California license and they have a license from their home state?
Again, you have to read the minimum qualifications. So if it says that you need a valid California driver's license, if you have a driver's license from Texas, you do not meet the minimum requirements. However, if your spouse is interested in a position with the state of California, we have over 3,500 different classifications, sometimes doing very similar duties. So one job might require a driver's license and a similar job may not require you to have to drive. So I would just say continue to look for other vacancies on CalCareers because we have lots of them.
All right, so let's go to another question. Does out of business under address supervisor affect the job hiring process?
No, we understand that businesses close down all the time. And it's going to be even a lot more, hopefully not, but we understand it's probably going to be a lot more due to COVID-19. So it's common practice. We just went through the Great Recession starting in about 2008, 2009, and a lot of businesses closed down during that time period. We do not hold that against you. We can only look at your work experience that you list. So we're looking at experience, not necessarily how much you made in that particular position. We just look at duties.
So the next question says, will the status state if it was denied, or how do you know if you do not qualify?
Well, if you do not qualify, you typically do not qualify in the examination portion. So you have to take an exam, whether that's an in-person exam or an online examination. And before you can take the exam, you have to let us know how you meet the minimum qualifications. And you're typically kicked out during the examination process. However, sometimes people do lie and they get past the examination portion and into a hiring interview. And then it comes out in the hiring interview that you lied about your previous experience because you couldn't answer any of the questions that are relevant to the position. In that case, there's a HR process called withholding. And we will withhold you from the list saying that this person lied and that they should not be on the eligibility list, which is the examination results list. And you're unable to take that examination for the period of time specified in a letter. So we will let you know if you're not qualified, whether in the examination before you take it, or if you lied on your experience, we will withhold you from the eligibility list and you cannot apply for that particular vacancy.
All right, so moving on to the next question. What does application status active mean? Also, I have seen the application status remain in the submitted status and the person received an interview. Also in the active status, I was in the active status, but I never received an interview.
Yes, application active status means that the department is actively reviewing your application and is doing hiring interviews. And just because it's active does not mean that you have been selected. Departments are getting better with notifying job seekers if the job they applied for, they were not admitted to participate in a hiring interview. Usually that's sent through your CalCareer account in the email section. However, some departments do not inform their the job seekers that they did not qualify, which we're trying to remedy behind the scenes at CalHR to let the hiring managers know, hey, please let the people know if they're being interviewed or not, because then we get questions like that was just asked. Hey, I've seen my application status say active, but I never got an interview. I never heard back from the job. And that's just poor customer service on the state's part. And so we're getting better with that.
And just to add to that component, I know that the new implementations for managers, at least with EDD, has been that there needs to be a whole process of, when candidates have not been selected, an email must be sent. And so definitely that is going to be continuing to be pushed forward, so that way everybody is aware whether they got hired or not, or they're even being to jump for an interview. We have another question pertaining education. So what about when you don't have a transcript of all the different work that you did, right? But you do have a diploma and it is credited. Do you need those transcripts?
Absolutely. If we're asking for a transcript in the job announcement, it's typically because you have to have completed certain courses as the minimum qualifications. And so we need to see not just the diploma, we need to see the transcripts. And it doesn't have to be an official transcript, because we understand official transcripts cost money. We can see an unofficial transcripts as well, if it's not indicated there. If it says an official transcript, then you have to go to the school you graduated from and get that official transcript. But typically, it will just say college transcripts, and you could just submit your unofficial.
Okay. Another question. Are there any examples of SOQs that people can look somewhere or find them?
CalHR is currently developing a statement of qualifications training. A lot of things got pushed back due to COVID-19, and our focus being to help, control this virus and helping other departments out. So I know that the release date has gotten pushed back, but we are currently working on a statement of qualifications online training that will be available on calcareers.ca.gov that will have samples of statement of qualifications. That was the direction a few months ago. I believe we're still pushing forward with that direction.
All right. So another question: if you have a foreign language on your resume that should be added somewhere else on the actual application, would that be a helpful skill? Language skills, something highlighted?
Absolutely. Being able to speak multiple language is definitely a plus, especially with the state of California, because California is one of the most diverse states throughout the United States. So if you can speak a language besides English, this would be a great skill set for EDD, because the Employment Development Department deals with people from all races and language. Same thing with the Department of Motor Vehicles. They're a forward-facing state department that deals with everyone throughout California with multiple languages. Covered California, a 911 dispatcher through Highway Patrol or the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. We have dispatchers there where you need to be able to speak multiple languages. And there's a pay differential at a lot of these different departments if you can't speak multiple languages. So it is definitely a plus.
All right. So let's see. We covered that already. There were some questions that were kind of repetitive from the chat box. What if my current employer does not know that I am applying for a new position?
Yes, that's a common question that is asked. A lot of times people from the private industry especially, they feel as though there could be some type of retaliation if their employer knows that they're applying for another position. Typical state practice is that we're only going to call your current employer if you're considered for the job. Usually, most state departments will call the top 2 candidates' references. So if they're calling your hiring manager, it's typically to say that we're interested in hiring this employee. So you are within the top 2 people that are going to get the job. Osvaldo or Jonathan, do you have any other feedback regarding that?
Well, I think it just depends in regards to, where you are with your own working relationships with your current, right, office or company. But I think just if you don't want to list them, I mean, you have that option and you may list other folks, right? So I think that you kind of have a little wiggle room for that.
Perfect.
All right, so let me see if we can get to a couple more questions. We still got some time. Let's see. So we have a question. My supervisor is most likely teleworking. Should we list their desk phone number, although they're more not likely to be in the office? How do we reach out, right? So that's a concern, I guess. What phone number to use?
What phone number to use? If you are unaware, I would probably ask your supervisor or manager what is the best number to reach you at. And we won't typically use the state application's phone numbers. Whenever you have a state interview, we will ask you to provide a list of references. And so you will provide the references for us that we can call to make sure the information that you have said is valid. So at that point in time, when you're in a hiring interview, that's when I would probably correspond with your manager to ask what is the best contact information for you.
There's this upcoming question. I think I already know the answer to this. You can feel free to correct me. So if you're chosen for an interview, how long from the close of the application do most departments contact applicants for an interview? And that will vary. It could be weeks, perhaps days, or maybe up to a month. And that depends on how many applicants, how many job positions that department has going on, and also depending on the HR process as they're like reviewing all the minimum qualifications. Is that correct, Brandon?
Absolutely. You hit it right on the nail.
All right. So what is a reactivation letter? I cannot find this in the glossary.
A reactivation letter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you talking about an inquiry letter?
Let's see. It doesn't state anything else beyond that. Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I do not know the answer to that. I can look through the frequently asked questions section or look at the glossary really quick to see if I can find that information. Let me go to R. If not, I'll give you my contact information after this, and then you can reach out to me. Yeah, I've never heard of a reactivation letter, unfortunately.
All right, so let's move forward with a couple more questions before we wrap this up. If you have a job experience in the same position, but with gaps in employment, such as summer jobs, seasonal work, does each time you return to the position, does it need to be put as a new job experience in the state application?
Yes, I would recommend if there was a break in your work experience that you indicate that. Because, for instance, we have to calculate that experience. Let's say you worked in a seasonal position at the California State Fair from July and August. That's 2 months of work experience. However, if you worked at the fair every summer for 5 years, You do not want to put that you worked from July 2015 to July of 2020, 40 hours per week, because instead of having 2 months of experience every 5 years, which would be 10 months of experience, now you're indicating that you have 5 years of experience. And once we interview you in a hiring interview, and it's determined that you actually have 10 months of work experience instead of 5 years, then it looks like you lied about your work experience. So in my opinion, please split that up if there was a substantial break in your work experience. And you can just indicate leave of absence. You don't have to talk about what type of leave of absence you had, because there are a lot of EEO protected leaves of absences, such as pregnancy. You might have had FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. There's all kind of reasons that we can't pry into because that's going against HIPAA laws. So you can just put leave of absence and that's fine. We will not penalize you for it.
All right. So the next question, how long should we wait until we follow up with the position that we apply for, especially when we haven't heard for a while?
In my opinion, I would say to reach out to the contact person listed in the vacancies about 2 weeks after the final filing date. A week might be too soon, especially if the hiring manager had hundreds of applications. Osvaldo or Jonathan, if you have any other time period that you think, but I would say about 2 weeks is fair.
Yeah, I think usually 2 weeks tends to be somewhat fair, and also will depend once again on the process. Some of the panels might be 3 folks or more, so then everyone has to review all the applications. I just actually recently went through the hiring of one of my new staff members, and I had about 40 applicants, but another colleague of mine got 157. So then it might take them probably 3 weeks before they can even get back to some people asking in regards to the position. But yeah, usually 2 weeks tends to be the best average.
I agree. It could be 2 weeks, but sometimes it could be more than 2 months per se, for the reason that there's multiple positions available. Let's say the manager of that unit is available. They need to hire the manager first, and then they'll review the applicants for the actual unit. There's times where I applied for a position in the past and didn't receive a phone call until 2 months since I applied. So it does vary, but I do agree with Osvaldo, 2 weeks for the most part.
Yeah, and then Jonathan and Osvaldo, just a follow-up question regarding that. Does your work stop when you have to go and review these applications and set up hiring interviews that may take a week or two? Does another hiring manager take on your day-to-day workload, or do you have to fit that 150 review of applications into your day-to-day task?
Oh, that's a good question. No, our job doesn't stop. We still have to continue doing our daily tasks and still provide support to our staff members or any other request that may come from upper management or senior management. So at least so far, that has been my experience in this year that I've started becoming a manager, that yeah, the job's still there, and then we have to review applications.
Absolutely. So that is a lot of times what's going on behind the scenes. A hiring manager has a very huge workload with the state of California, and they have to fit in time, whether that's working late nights or even on the weekends, to review applications. And they have to work with other hiring managers or staff to correlate their time to make sure that they have time to sit on the hiring panel. So there's a lot of behind the scenes things that are going on. That's why the hiring process may take a little longer with some departments, and others it could go fairly fast.
All right, so we have 2 more questions here. So one of them says, what qualifies applicants for the position that says we'll consider training and development? TAD.
Okay, so with the state of California, we really invest in our employees. We have upward mobility program, which is for entry-level positions. We give you the right training, tools, and resources to make you promotable with the state of California. We have multiple career advancement opportunities as well. And part of that upward mobility and career advancement opportunities, we have training and development assignments for our internal state employees. So, for example, if I work as an associate governmental program analyst with the state of California, but I want to switch career paths and learn IT work. I would work out with my manager and with the hiring manager of the IT area of the department to do a training and development assignment, which will say, hey, we'll train you for this particular position that you're applying for, and we'll develop you. Therefore, when you apply for the position to be in it permanently, you have the skills needed. Usually you don't come into a training and development assignment and you meet the minimum qualifications. Usually it's a way to advance your career or an upward mobility opportunity to make you more marketable with the state of California. So training and development assignments are internal to state employees.
Okay, here's another question in regards to, let's see, typing test requirements for the state of California. Are they being waived for the time being due to COVID-19?
No, they're not being waived. And I'll let Jonathan and Osvaldo respond to what services that EDD offers, such as America's Job Centers.
Hi, this is Jonathan. I could talk about the America's Job Center, the types of services that the field offices do provide. So the America's Job Centers, they do provide typing tests. Some of the job centers, or most of the job centers actually, are available through appointments only. Most of them are closed due to the pandemic. So please give them a call. You can always search for these EDD offices on Google or EDD's website on the America's Job Center office locator. But there's also additional services that they do provide, such as resume assistance, and they have workshops on interviews and also job coaching where they can assist you in looking for the different types of careers out there.
Perfect. And Jonathan and Osvaldo, will you be providing a link to where they can find out more information about America's Job Centers after today's presentation?
Yes, we can definitely. Later on today, I'll be sending a survey in regards to this workshop, and I'll attach the FAQs and then information about the AJCCs, and then also to answer some of the ongoing questions for the webinar for today. This is being live streamed on YouTube, so then this will be made available for the public. So this is also being recorded. The workshop from last week, we have to re-record due to some technical difficulty. So once again, once we get the recordings clear and set, also we have to make sure that we provide closed captioning, right? So we have to make sure that all of our information goes out to everyone and it's also being ADA compliant. So once that information gets set, we hopefully maybe by this Friday, if not early next week, you'll have the workshops 1 and 2, and then also all that information on the FAQ videos, and then the information on the AJCCs. But today, at least I'll be able to send some of that information. And Brandon, do you have a couple more minutes to answer a few more questions?
Absolutely.
All right. So let me see where I left off. So there, here's a follow-up in regards to the reactivation letter. So the individual said, I was unsure because I received the reactivation letter after submitting my application. The letter had instructions on filling out a survey to assess qualifications, but I was just curious as to what it meant in the hiring timeline.
Yes, I would have to research what the reactivation letter is. I've never heard of that term, so I would have to look that up. If you can please contact me offline. My email address is state.recruit@calhr.ca.gov, or you can always reach out to me at the calcareers@calhr.ca.gov, etc. And the contact information that's listed in the frequently asked questions area and the help tutorial section on CalCareers.
All right, so here's a question about salary. Do we have to indicate the amount desired, or do we wait to negotiate on second interviews?
Typically, we do not negotiate salaries with the state of California. We do sometimes for hard to recruit classifications, such as psychologists, who are, there's a nationwide shortage of psychologists, so they typically can negotiate their salaries. But for an office technician position, usually we get hundreds of applications, so we don't negotiate salary for positions that are in high demand. You usually will start off at the minimum salary, and every year you get a 5% increase if approved.
Right, and then in regards to the hardship question that was asked before, so this individual looked into the calculator and it looks like it is just to transfer eligibility so that you do not have to take the exam. But the question was regarding to hardship transfers, but I couldn't find some information on it.
Yeah, and that's another question that's probably best for offline. If you can reach out to me at state.recruit@calhr.ca.gov, or if you can email the calcareers@calhr.ca.gov, we can get your answer to that question. You just need to take a little bit more research and ask some follow-up questions.
And then lastly, just to finish up with questions in regards to the typing tests, does it have to be something current? Can it be an old typing test? Do typing tests expire in general?
I believe typing tests do expire after a couple of years. It will say that on the notice. So if it has expired, as Jonathan and Osvaldo explained earlier, please reach out to your local AJC, which is America's Job Centers, and they will be able to assist you with scheduling an appointment for you to take a newer typing test. But I believe they do expire after a couple of years. So you just have to look at your letter that you received.
And I think the same kind of applies to pretty much all the testing that is done, right, for SSAs, AGPAs. It's either 6 months or maybe up to a year, right, they expire. So once you have taken them, you have to kind of wait until that time passes by, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. On the examination bulletin, it will let you know when your eligibility expires, and it will tell you when you can retake the examination. So you always want to look at the examination bulletin. And if you missed our session from last Monday, we plan on recording a new session. I believe it's Wednesday, Osvaldo?
Yes, this Wednesday.
This Wednesday, we'll have information available through social media, et cetera. And we will send you out information regarding the upcoming webinar. And if you can't attend it, we'll have it recorded for you. And so that's where we'll go into more detail about the state hiring process, what an examination typically looks like, what to look for in an examination bulletin, the hiring process, et cetera.
Okay. Well, then that pretty much summarizes all the questions. There were over 90 questions being asked. And so I want to thank Jonathan, Tamara, and also Brandon for responding, left and right, making sure that we capture all that information. And then Brandon, it's been requested if in the chat box you can put your emails.
Perfect.
That way all the attendees can copy and paste it. And with that, if there's nothing else left, anything else, Jonathan, on your end?
No, I think that's all. Thank you, Brandon. It's been the information has been really helpful, and I'm sure it's been beneficial. We did receive a few comments that they did thank you, and they're excited to be here. There were some attendees or questions asking if they can register for the next training. And Osvaldo, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but unfortunately, all the spots have been taken, but there will be a recording available to the public at a later date.
Yeah, definitely. And also, what has happened too is that some of the attendees have not shown up. So I will be sending once again today an email through Eventbrite with the survey, some information on the HJCCs, the FAQs, and then also the information to log in for next week. And if not everyone shows up, you might be able to jump in for the workshop. But once again, if it's crowded, if it's full, or the system doesn't let you in, then we'll be providing a recording. And then once again, I'm going to send another email with all the recordings so that way you can view them on YouTube through the EDD channel, and then you can have them and review them as many times as you need to. So, okay, so with that, we'll stop our live streaming. Thank you so much, everyone, and take care. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.